So, I've just got the news that Africa has finally decided to be in line with the rest of the world and hold their Africa Cup of Nations every 4 years as of 2028. Now, this is something I've wanted for a long time, and I can remember being as young as between the ages of 12 and 14, asking myself why the Africa Cup of Nations isn't every 4 years, like the Euros, the Asia Cup, like Copa America. Like, I've always wondered to myself why Africa Cup of Nations is every 2 years, and even when it was in every two even numbered years, it was always in the same years as the World Cup, which doesn't make any sense. I mean, you see African nations playing at both AFCON and the World Cup. You just think to yourself, okay, why are nations playing in two different tournaments in the same year? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But I'm glad that AFCON, or CAF even, I should say, have decided to host the Africa Cup of Nations every 4 years as of 2028. Now, what will this mean for African football? Well, the way I see it, I think that it will allow smaller nations to improve for in a longer period, rather than having to make fast improvements over a significantly shorter period. And that's, for me, where it makes sense to host the Africa Cup of Nations every 4 years rather than every 2 years. I mean, I've seen that the Confederation of African Football, or CAF for short, were committed to hosting the Africa Cup of Nations every 2 years so as to generate as much funds as possible. But from a competitive point of view, it didn't really make much sense to host the Africa Cup of Nations every 2 years, given that smaller nations wouldn't have much time to improve. Although there have been significant improvements from expanding the tournament from 16 teams to 24 teams, which it has been for the last few years now, I think. I'm not too sure, someone correct me on that. But there are other improvements to hosting the Africa Cup of Nations every 4 years rather than every 2 years. Like, you tell me what other improvements have been made to the changes that CAF have made. If there's anything I'm disappointed in, though, it's the fact that the Africa Cup of Nations will be held in the same years as the Euros and Copa America. I mean, why do you have like multiple continental tournaments happening in the same year? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, Copa America, they moved from odd numbered years to even numbered years, and I sort of questioned to myself, like, why would they challenge UEFA? Like, it doesn't make any sense. But this is about African football, not South American football, so that's another discussion for another time. But looking at African football, I just don't get it, honestly. Like, the Euros already takes place in leap years, so why wouldn't CAF have their tournament take place in odd numbered years? Like, rather than say start in 2028 and every 4 years after that, how about host it in 2027 or 2029 and then host it every 4 years thereafter? But I don't know. What are your thoughts Like, is the African Cup of Nations being held in even numbered years better or worse? Or would the tournament being hosted in odd numbered years? So, say 2027, then 2031, and then thereafter, or 2029, then 2033, and then thereafter. Like, what are your thoughts? Or does it really make much difference as to when it's held? And am I just clutching at straws here? You tell me. Another thing is the African Nations League. Now, this is something that I predicted. Well, I didn't really predict it as such, but it was just an idea for a tournament I wrote about on Halftime Cuppa. Shout out to them, and I'll put the link in the article in the descriptions below, so you can go check that out. So anyway, about this African Nations League, will this improve African football? I believe it may do so, as we'll be seeing teams of similar strength facing each other, as that's something we're already seeing with the UEFA Nations League. But one thing about this CAF Nations League that I'm not so sure about is the fact that it's taking place every year. Like, why not every 2 years? That's my only gripe with this. Other than that, I like the fact that an African Nations League will be happening, as this will improve African football massively, or at least I believe so. But I'd like to know what you think. Will an African Nations League improve football, or will this be to the detriment of African football? I'd like to know what you think. One more thing about this new African Nations League. Could this be used as another opportunity for African teams to qualify for World Cup and Africa Cup of Nations if they don't do so through normal qualification procedures? I believe, yes, this will be used for qualification for World Cup and Africa Cup of Nations, as it will be great to see sides to be given another chance to qualify for major tournaments via maybe a playoff or something like that. Like, I'd like to know what you think. I mean, the sides that finished top of their qualification groups for World Cup and Africa Cup of Nations, they already qualify for these major tournaments. But for teams that don't qualify, teams that finish maybe second or third in their qualification groups, they could be given another opportunity to qualify for major tournaments through the Nations League, which I believe serves as a positive, as it means that their qualification rounds won't be over. But I'd like to know what you think, because we already see this in Europe. So to see the same thing in Africa, that can only be a positive, right? Or will it be a negative? I don't know. What do you think?